Now, in storing files and in storing backups and archival copies of files, in burning them to CDs and DVDs, there's something else you can do to compress them. You can select Files or Folder and come up here to the File menu and choose to compress whatever is selected. And what's going to happen is what's called a zip file is being created. By default, it will have the name of what is selected. And by the way, I'm going to turn off the color here so that you don't think that that's blue is selected. So I've created something called documents.zip. It's called a zip archive. If I come up here to Documents and choose Get Info, you'll see that the folder contains 47.6 megabytes, but the compressed version contains only 13 megabytes. Now, different types of files compress differently. So you cannot come up with an absolute formula for how things will compress. But in general, you can get a good deal of compression unless the file is already compressed. So for example, JPEG image files already have compression built into them, so you're not going to get more additional compression. Files like FileMaker databases, many word processing documents, and so forth, they tend to compress a good deal. So what you could do is you can take, when you're going to be doing your archiving and backing up to external drives and DVDs, you can compress files, and then the compressed versions will take up much less space. When you have a zip file, if you double click on it to open it, it will be unarchived. If you already have a file or folder with that name, a number will be added to it. So here I have the files that were originally in Documents, put them into a compressed archive, and brought them back. And I'll drag this one back over here. Now, this also, if you're sending files or folders, it's very useful to use the zip archive because it takes up much less space in the email. There are other types of archives that can be created and that you can expand with Mac OS X, but the compress command in the file menu is only going to create a zip archive, and you may see a suffix of TAR or GZ, and those are compressed files which you should be able to open just by double clicking on them. Now, if I'll get rid of this archive, I'll go back into Documents. If I hold down the Command key and select several files and perhaps even a folder, I can compress all of those. In this case, the compressed file is going to be called archive.zip, and I can then rename it, and in fact you should rename it quickly before you forget what's in it. Otherwise you wind up having a lot of files called archive.zip, archive2.zip, and so forth, and you have to open all of them to figure out what's in them. So if you have a file that's just called archive.zip because it contains a variety of files and folders, rename it as soon as it's been created. So that's the easiest way to archive files that you're either going to store or you're going to email. And there's another trick you can use with archiving. If you want to prevent something from being opened, whether it's an application or a document, you can compress it and throw away the original. Now, why would you do something like this? One reason is if you are converting, let's say you are upgrading an application to a new version, or you are saving a copy of a file in a certain condition and then you're working on a copy of it. If you compress the file, whether it's the application or the document, you can't accidentally open it. You'll have to open the zip archive and it will have to be expanded, and that may give you enough warning when you click on it to say, oops, this is not the one I wanted to do. I didn't want to be opening an archive. I wanted to be opening the file or folder.